Well, it's been quite a week here, has it not? I don't know if you started off your week this week like I did, sitting in front of the TV set Monday night, watching everything unfold in the city of Baltimore, and I spent probably a couple hours in front of the TV watching things unfold and looking at what was happening. And it's been quite a week, because then by Friday we had charges filed against police officers in the case. And I look at this week, and it's been kind of a roller coaster ride for the city of Baltimore, a city that we probably call our home city, as a suburb of here in Ellicott City. But I've been thinking about this, and I don't want to look at what happened as much as I want to talk about where did I see God working this week. I saw God this week. One place I saw God this week was in the clergy who took to the streets of Baltimore, to go out into the streets of Baltimore and say to the agitators and the looters, get off the streets. I think our clergy, and Rodney Hudson, who's the pastor of Ames Memorial United Methodist Church in Baltimore off North Carey Street, we have a partnership with their church. We've been working together for the past few years, and it was great to see Pastor Rodney being one of the pastors who was out on the streets asking them to get off the streets. I think those clergy did more good in the city of Baltimore on Monday than police in riot gear on Monday. Yeah, I'd say amen to that. Because I saw in them God's response. That's where I saw God. And the parents, I don't know if you saw the viral video of the parent, the mom, taking her. I thought that was great parent. I don't appreciate the abuse, but the physical abuse, but I can understand the frustration as a parent and wanting to do that. So I'm grateful for parents. I'm also grateful that Tuesday morning, our men's group gathers for breakfast on Tuesday morning, one of our men's small groups. And some men got together in that small group and said, we're going to go down to Baltimore this morning. We're going to help clean up. We had five guys. I know Rod was one of them. Go into the city of Baltimore Tuesday morning. I think they got down there about 10:30. And they were going to hoping to clean up the liquor store, the CVS you saw in the news that had been destroyed. That had already been taken care of when they got there. It was already cleaned up. So what all these volunteers did, they started going into other streets and other alleys and cleaning up the streets of Baltimore and throwing bags into trash trucks. And the city today is cleaner today than it was a week ago, even given everything that happened this week. I think that's God's work. I'm also appreciative and thanking God for our mission board here, who coordinates with Ames Memorial, and they've been collecting donations throughout the week. If you've seen on our Facebook page, or you've seen in the Pastor Pondering email information how you can help. We didn't have time to get in the bulletin this week, but if you want to find out more how you can respond, there are ways to do that on the Facebook page, Glenmar Church, or getting the Pastor's Ponderings email. And our mission board members were collecting resources, and several of them have made several trips down to Ames and dropped off supplies at Ames Memorial Church in response of simple things like deodorant, because what do you get at CVS, right? Anything you get at CVS in your neighborhood, you can't get it anymore. So they were taking supplies down to them, health kits down to them, food, diapers for kids, things like that for the community. So I'm thankful for the ways I've seen God respond this week through the people. And that's the thing. As we get into the story this morning, that's what God's looking for from servants. Response. What are we going to do? Here's the thing about Faithonomics. Not only is it about our faith in God, but here's the kind of interesting thing and the scary thing is that God puts faith in us. God is entrusting us to respond to the world around us. God has given us resources, time, talents, all these things to respond to the brokenness of our world. And are we going to be faithful in our response? Think about that. God's entrusted you. Because I think a lot of times we look at God and we say, God, will just part the Red Sea or perform some miracle in Baltimore, or, hey, give me a sign that lights up and says, go, go, go. Whatever, we want this miracle. And yet God says back to us, I'm not giving you the miracle. I want you to be the miracle. I want you to use what I've given you to serve God's people. I want you to use the resources that have been entrusted to you to make a difference in the world around you. I'm entrusting this world to you. We are stewards of everything. We are stewards of everything that God has given us. So that's what this story's about. How are we doing with that? So we learned this morning about 3 stewards or 3 servants. They call slave in NRSV here, or the version we have. I actually like the word servant. That's what they were serving this household. The master left to the servants. These entrusted them to talents. Now, a talent is actually a weight of measure, 75-pound measure of weight. And that would have been weighed out in some precious metal. We think in this case it would have been silver. So each one of them was given a talent or 75 pounds of silver. If you total up all that in today's terms, it would have equaled $1,977,600. Almost $2 million had been given to 3 servants. The first one got $1.25 million. The second one got $500,000. And the third one got $250,000. Now, because you and I look at this parable and say, what's the big deal that he didn't get interest? I mean, we look at today's interest rates in our savings account. What are we getting today, right? What is it? What are you getting from the bank today? Like less than 1%, right? And so we think, what's the big deal? Why get all upset about the little bit? But think about $250,000. Assume better interest rates that day than today. But take $250,000 and invest $250,000 in the stock market today. What kind of return investment would you get? Pretty good right now, not 2007. But think about that, and so that's what the master is saying to the servant. You could have at least done something with it, but that servant doesn't. What's going on in the heart of that servant? The heart of that servant is, first of all, fear. They're afraid to do anything. They're afraid, and what does fear do to us? Fear paralyzes us. Fear makes us hide things and hide our gifts and hide our resources and dig a hole in the ground, and we just hide it all away because we're afraid of what might happen if we do anything with it. We get afraid. And when we get afraid, we bury things. Now, the other thing, notice that what that servant does is, who does the servant blame for hiding the money? Right, he blames the master. I'm going to take the $250,000 you gave me, that's yours, and I'm going to hide it in the ground, and it's your fault that I did that. That's why he's called not only a lazy servant, but a wicked servant. Lazy and wicked. Fear and blame is what led to that. So what Jesus is trying to teach us is that there are some things that we can take from this story and apply to our own lives and to our own what God has given to us. And I think the first thing we got to get our minds around, and the thing that I've grown into understanding as a Christian, is that everything I have is God's, not mine. And so one of the first things we learn from this story is that God is if everything is God, then God is entrusting us with the resources that we have. If everything I have is God's, then they've been entrusted to me by God, and they're not mine. It's so easy to think of it as mine, though, isn't it? Great example is when I had a neighbor. We lived together for long next to each other, and we shared an open space between our houses. It was all grass, and then I would mow half, and he would mow half. And then when I wasn't mowing my half quick enough, he would mow a diagonal line across my section just to mess with me, And sometimes he actually, when I was on vacation, he would mow that part of the grass for me. And one day, and so they moved out, and new neighbors came in, and it came May, April mowing season. Y'all like mowing your yard now? You liking that? And so I got out there first. I didn't get out there quick enough, and my new neighbor mowed that section of the lawn for me. This swath, about 25 feet wide, and went the length of our lot. And I said, wow, what a nice guy. So next week goes by. He gets out ahead of me again, because I'm always late on my lawn. My neighbor's probably like, that guy lets his grass go so high. So I get out the next week, and he mowed my lawn again, and I thought, wow, this is a really nice guy. New neighbor. I like this guy. So the next week, I see him out in the yard, and I go up to him as he's, because I'm trying to get my mowing going on this ahead of time, and I say to him, thanks for mowing my lawn. He said, your lawn? I said, yeah, that's my lawn you keep mowing. And he's like, I thought that was my lawn. See, where we had put our fence was 25 feet away from the boundary of our yard. So he thought the fence was where the line of our yard was. So thought that was all his. When he bought the house, he thought all that was his. And so then we got in a little neighborly debate about what's mine and what he thought was his. So we actually had to go dig up the survey marker in the ground to see where the boundary was. And then he got the picture. But it was interesting how that kind of just changed our relationship. And how easy it was to forget that this land isn't mine, it's God's. This property's not mine. In fact, today, it's not mine. I had it for 10 years. I had care of it for 10 years. It was never really mine. It was something that God had given to me. In fact, all of our planet is given to us by God. Every single part of it is a gift from God. It's not ours. But we tend to forget that God gave us these things. The other thing is that we learn from this story is that God's looking for faithful use of our God-given resources. So God's entrusted us with these things, and are we faithfully using them, these God-given resources from God, are we faithfully using them in a way that benefits God and others, and as well as our own families? And so notice the other thing about each servant got a different amount. Everybody in this room has a different amount of resources. Everybody's different. And so you might have 5 talents of resources. You might have 2 talent of resources. You might have 1 talent of resources. It doesn't matter. The question is, how are we using what we have been given, whatever the amount is? And we'll talk more about what those resources are in a minute. It's not just money. So I learned this idea when I was actually serving in the mission field, because I go from a resource-rich United States where we've got everything, and I go help serve in a resource-less context in a developing country. And for example, when I went to Chetumal, Mexico, I've mentioned that trip before in sermons, but I went there and I was mixing cement by hand with a shovel every day. That was my job. And I went to the coordinator of the project. We were actually building a church in a Sunday school building, actually to have education classes on a landfill. And so we were mixing the cement for everything in the building by hand. And I thought to myself, if we could just rent one of those mixers, with the engine on it, put some gasoline in it, start up the generator, it would turn it for us. We just throw the stuff in and it would turn it for us, and then we could get it. We could do this a lot quicker. So I went to the coordinator and I said, if we could rent a mixer, a cement mixer, they make these mixers, they pull it behind a truck or whatever and bring it to the site, we could really power through this. I'll pay for it. Looked at me and says, well, we don't have any rental companies in this city. I'm thinking resource-rich place. Rental companies, I can go to Home Depot, I can go, see what I'm saying? And so then he said, I think we only have one hand crank mixer in the whole city of Chetumal where 600,000 people live. There's only one of those mixers. So I realized I needed to just keep working by hand. That's what I realized. But what I realized was that to redefine what excellence is, to redefine what faithfulness looks like, it's not about the amount of resources that we have. It's about what we're doing with the resources we have. I came across this quote in a church a few years back that says this: excellence is doing the best with what you have been given. The point of the story is that God is saying to us, are you doing the best with what you have been given? And we've been given an abundance of resources. We have been given so much by God in this country and in this place we live in called Howard County. So we live in an abundant, resource-rich place. So what are the resources that God has given to us? And as I said, it's not just money. But I'm going to start with money. Let's talk about wealth. Wealth is one of the resources we have in abundance in Howard County. And we all have differing amounts of wealth, but we all have tremendously more wealth here than most, I would say, the vast, large majority of the world, even of the nation. And so we've got a lot of wealth. How are we using that wealth? It is God's. God's entrusted us with this wealth to make a difference in the world. I want you also to think about, here's how I think of this and why I think this is God. All my wealth is really God's. I didn't decide where I was going to be born on this planet. Did you? I didn't decide to be born in Montgomery County, one of the wealthiest counties in the nation, one of the wealthiest counties in the entire world. I didn't decide to be born in a place where I could get a college education, a master's education, and a doctoral education. Most people don't have those opportunities. I was born into a suburban middle-class family. This is all because of God. I did nothing for any of that. It's all from God. So anything I have today is ultimately from God. It is a blessing from God. Think about that. What are we doing? You're actually going to have an opportunity in a couple of weeks to take part of your wealth and use it for God's purposes here at Glenmar in 2 weeks when we ask you all to share your pledges for the next year with us. The other thing we all have is time. Now, we all have the same 24-hour day, correct? But not all of us have the same amount of time on the planet. So we're all using our 24-hour day in whatever way we see is best, but we also don't know how much time we've been given. Some of us have been given 1 year of life. Some of us are given 10 years of life. Some of us are given 50 years of life. Some of us are given over 100 years of life. Are we good? Are we being faithful with the time that we've been given? Because part of the story is that we don't know when the master's going to come back and call things to account and call for the accounting of our lives. So are we being faithful every day with our time? The other thing I think we often neglect to think about is energy. Those of you who are more mature in the room, how's the energy level going as you mature? What happens to energy, right? I've noticed something as, when I was younger, I didn't worry about it so much, but I'm starting to worry about it more, and having to manage it differently. And different things that we do require different amounts of energy. Some things don't require a lot of energy. Some things require a lot of energy. So the question is, how are we managing and how are we faithful with the energy God has given us? And are we using our energy for the best things of God? For God the best? Are we giving our best energy to the things of God? Here's another thing, a little trick in here. Not a trick, but a little insight. Sometimes taking care of yourself is helpful to renewing energy. My example for this is a couple weeks ago I had a grill on stage and I grilled a steak. Did anybody remember that sermon from a couple weeks ago? Yeah, I hate to live in the past, but I had a lot of fun with that if you didn't notice. But a lot of people, several people came up to me afterwards and in a sense have said, where do you get these ideas? Where do you get this crazy ideas? And I'll tell you where I get some of them. I don't get them sitting behind a computer typing my sermon. I don't get them sitting in our church office. I get a lot of great ideas when I'm out running in the woods. Now you'd think I wasn't working when I'm taking care. But what I'm saying is what is going on when I go out and run or exercise or take care of myself is I'm renewing energy, and then I'm taking that energy that's being renewed and I'm reapplying it to creativity. And so that's why taking care of ourselves is actually important to managing our energy and being faithful with our energy and giving our best energy to the things of God, to what God's called us to do. So God's called me to preach, and so I try and bring my best energy to that. That's what God's asked. So are we being faithful with our energy? Have you ever given all your energy to work, and then when you get home with your family, there's not much left? Is that the way God wants things to be? It's a good question, isn't it? What about skills, talents? Our skills are things that we've developed and learned, and our passions and our interests. Can God use those? Can we bring those to God's purposes? Can we bring those to God's kingdom purposes in the world? If I have a certain skill, am I applying it to making a difference in somebody else's life in a way that's making a difference in living for a greater purpose? And then lastly, I would suggest to you position. A lot of times we don't think about our position in life as being a resource, but it is. We all have a position in life. We have a position where we work, right? We probably have a title or a position that we have. Is it possible that God would want to use that position that we have at our work to make a difference in the people around us or make a difference in the world around us? Or think about a position that you have in your family. You know, we all think birth order, right? Or maybe we're a parent. Maybe we're a son or a daughter. All those positions matter. Think about your position in the church or your position in the community. My example would be I serve on the board to promote self-sufficiency for our county, the plan to end homelessness in Howard County. I am not on that board because of who I am as Matt. They didn't ask Matt to be on that board. They asked the pastor of Glenmar United Methodist Church to be on that board. They asked me because of my position in the church. If they had just seen plain old Matt walking down the street, they would have run the other way. They would say, not that guy. And sometimes they regret that I'm on the board. They will tell you because I say some things that rattles things up, status quo. But I think about that. So my question is, what's the position that God has given you? And is there a possibility that God wants you to be faithful in that position for God's purposes? So I want you to look at that wheel, and here's where I want you to think about application to your life. All of us have different amounts of all those things. So I want you to think about what do you have? How much wealth you have, how much time you have, how much energy you have, how much skills you have, and where your positions lie. Think about all those things as resources in your life. The question is there a place somewhere in all those resources that God may be asking you to invest more wisely and to be more faithful? Where is God asking for faithfulness for you in some area of your life that might make a greater difference in the world around you? Think about that. And as you think about that, let me close with this story about George. George was sitting behind the desk. His position was the desk clerk and manager of a very small hotel. That was his position. He spent most of his time behind that desk running the hotel. Late one evening, an elderly couple came into the hotel, came up to him and asked if they could get a room, and he told them that they didn't have any vacancy. We were out, and they say, we thought that might be the case. We've been to several other hotels in the area, and they're all out. Everybody's full. And it was late at night, and this couple was older in age, and he finally said, why don't you just take my room? And they said, we can't do that, and he kept pressuring and insisting that they take it. And I imagine he may have done this before. So he gave up his room, and he stayed that night at the front desk. The couple took the room. The next morning, they came out to the desk, and George was still at the desk, and they thanked him for giving the room, and they were getting ready to pay for the room, and the gentleman said to George, you're the kind of man who should be managing the best hotel in the country. He said, someday I'm going to build that hotel and I'm going to let you manage it. Several years go by. George gets a letter in the mail at his hotel. In that letter is a request to come to New York City, and in that letter is 2 round-trip tickets to New York. So he goes to New York City, shows up, meets the gentleman he had met years ago in his hotel, and he said he met, and he was then taken to another hotel, and he says, here's the hotel I want you to manage. And that hotel was the Waldorf Astoria. The gentleman's name was William Waldorf Astor, and his wife that stayed. And that's the other thing about this story. Did you notice what Jesus said? Jesus said, for to all those who have, and we have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. That's the way God works. That's the way faith works. That God puts faith in us and entrusts us with things to be faithful with, and our faith grows as well in abundance. when we faithfully use what God has given us. Amen.